Hi, I'm Paul Brodie, back in the shop. Welcome. Mitch behind the camera. Viewers have been noticing that there's a bicycle up on the shelf here. It's not there anymore because it's down over here, but they wanted to know about that bicycle. That bicycle is the 69er. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of the background, how that came to be. I bought this property in 1997, and it was a foreclosure from the bank. The bank had seized it off the woman who lived here, and it was very run down, and basically it was land value. There were buildings on it, but they were of no real value at all. So where we are right now, that's where the barn was. And you can see the barn, and you can see Amber, my dog, running on the right. And I had to build a shop out of that. So I hired a crew of 4 people. They were called Best by Far. They were not Best by Far, but that's another story. And so about 6 weeks later, you can see what they had built. Obviously, that took care of the shop. Now I had to work on the house, and I knew I couldn't do that myself. I knew I needed some help, so I had to have a friend. We're still friends. That's Richard Parker, and he works in the construction business, and the company he works for, Heather Bray, they specialize in leaky condos, fixing leaky condos. So he was the guy to come in and rip and tear. He was very good at that. He wanted a mountain bike. He wanted a downhill mountain bike. So he had seen a magazine, and there was a bike in there, and it had a Shimano Nexus Hub up above the bottom bracket, and he wanted something like that. He asked me if I would build it for him. So we came up with an arrangement that we would swap hour for hour. It was a barter, and so he ended up doing 100 hours on my house, and I ended up doing 100 hours on the 69er. So that's basically how this project all came together. My shop became operational in the fall of '97, and so it was time for me to start using this new shop. And so basically my first big project was this bike. So I got my cardboard, I got my masking tape, I got my Sharpies, and I set up and I designed it to have 7 inches of travel on the back with a rising rate linkage and a Fox shock. Ultimately, this became frame number 4,213. I'd been in the bicycle industry for quite a while, so that was the next sequence of the number. In the photo, you can see all the parts laid out. This would be the spring of 1998. And then in the next photo, that's the bike assembled. That was the spring of 98, and that's when Richard, he took possession of the bike. That was a good thing. He now had his bike, and I had fulfilled my part of the barter. Why is the bike called the 69er? It's to do with the head tube angle. The head tube angle is 69 degrees. On the bicycle world, you always measure up from the horizontal. Back in 1997, 69 degrees was pretty slack. So that's all changed now. I understand that downhill bikes sometimes go to 64 degrees. The world has definitely changed. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the 4th owner of this bike. So Richard had it for about a year, and he raced it. And then he decided that he wanted something lighter. So he had a friend whose name was Patrick, and Patrick worked at a bike shop. He used to tune up the 69er. He expressed interest in the bike, so they did a swap, XTR parts for the bike. And now Patrick was the new owner of the bike. So he raced it for a year. This is its 2nd season. And at the end of that year, it started to get cracks. It got cracks, I think, here. And so we added on a gusset here. It didn't always have the gusset. And there was a few other cracks happening. So Richard came to me and he said, Patrick's a really good guy, and he works at a bike shop, and he doesn't make much money. And I knew exactly where this was going. So I said, okay, I'll weld it up, but he pays for the heat treating. So that's what happened. The bike got welded up, and then Patrick raced it for the second season. And then I heard that it was getting some cracks and all that. So I made the assumption, and there it is again. I made an assumption that the bike was at the end of its lifespan and that it was hanging up on a wall above a mantelpiece. No one ever mentioned anything like that. I just made the assumption. Anyway, I was wrong because I found out later that that's not what happened at all. I didn't hear anything about the bike for about 18 years. And then in 2017, I kept thinking about it. I couldn't get the bike off my mind. I decided that I was going to go and find the bike. So I got Patrick's phone number and I phoned for like 6 months and left a message, and nobody ever phoned me back. So I kind of left it for a while. And then a couple years passed and I decided, this is in 2019 now, I decided I got to find that bike. And this other friend of mine, Steve Mitchell, he's a collector. I knew that he was looking for the bike as well. So it became a race to find the bike. That's what I thought. So I found out that I could contact Patrick through Facebook, and I found him on the Sunshine Coast working at a bike shop, phoned him up, and I found out that he didn't own the bike anymore. It was Chris's bike now. They were friends. They both worked at that other bike shop, and Chris had always wanted the bike. And when Patrick stopped racing it, that's when the pressure really amped up. So they made a deal. Patrick, he told Chris that you can ride the bike, but if you break it, you got to buy it. So the first thing that Chris did was he took the bike up to Whistler. Whistler is a big mountain basically in our backyard, and it's got lots of downhill, and there's one line, I think it comes down under the chairlift, it's called the A line. That's what the experts ride. It's full of jumps, rocks, it's fast and all that. At the bottom, I think maybe you can see it from the pub, I guess that's the Longhorn, there's a thing called, it's an optional 8-foot cliff drop, and you can ride around it, no problem, but if you go over it, you're dropping down 8 feet. So he did it once, he did it twice, and on the third time he did it, the linkage exploded. So he'd broken the bike, so he had to buy it off of Patrick, which is what he wanted to do all along anyway. So it became his bike, and he tried to contact me, but the person or the company, a distributor of Brodie bikes, they weren't passing on the message, so I never got the message. So in Vancouver, he found a fab shop, and they did all the welding, and they made parts for him, and he redesigned the linkage. So he was racing it for another couple of years. I had no idea this was going on. I thought the bike was hung up on a mantelpiece. So one of the things that happened was that he had to get this piece worked on. This is the upper swing arm, and he took it to the shop, and somehow it got left at the shop for not 1 month, 2 months, 5 years. And in the course of the 5 years, the shop had a fire. And of course, this piece was gone. So he wasn't riding the bike. I still didn't know Chris at this point. So I became like a private eye. And I heard through the bike shop that he had worked at a auto wrecker in Surrey. So one Saturday morning, I got on the internet, and there was a whole list of them, and I started phoning. I went down the list. Hello, is Chris there? Why do you want to see Chris? Well, he's got a bike I want to buy. No, he's not here. So finally, I talked to someone. They said, yep, Chris works here. So I left a message, never got phoned back. So I went there in my van, and I walked in, I said, is Chris here? Oh, no, he doesn't work here. He works over there. So I went over there and phoned him up, and he didn't live far away. So I went to his house. We stood in the driveway, and we talked for 2 solid hours. We talked about bikes, the 69er, racing. And every half an hour, he'd go into his shed and he'd bring out another part of the 69er. So at the end of 2 hours, there was a pile of parts. It was pretty sad, but I got a bunch of stuff that I could work with. So I became the fourth owner, and I went there. I did not expect to meet Chris, didn't take any money, but he let me take all these parts anyway, and he told me that he needed a shock, he needed some tires and some other parts. So we basically did a trade. That's how I got the 69er. Now that I had the bike in my shop, I had to start finding parts. So I went on eBay, and the rims came from Norway. The shock, the Fox shock, it came out of Finland. And the one part that I couldn't find is the rotor on the back. It's a Hope rotor, because these brakes are early Hope, which is from England. And so you're going to see a photo. Mitch pops up on the screen. I'm looking for a 155 millimeter Hope rotor. If you have one, I would love to talk to you. I also want to thank the forks from my friend Steve Mitchell. He's the one who was also looking for the 69er. He's a great guy. And I think what we'll do now is to look at the bike and just see how this mechanism works. Okay, at the heart of this is a Shimano Nexus Hub here. It's a 7-speed. This hub, if you can see it from, this is the hub from here to here. It usually goes in the back wheel of a city bike or something like that. It's kind of heavy, but it's also pretty neat unit. Can you see there's a bearing here? Can you see from here to here there's a bearing? So that bearing is 4-inch OD, 3.5-inch ID, and it's a 1/4 inch wide. So it's a very hard to find bearing. And back in those days, I paid over $200 for it. I priced it yesterday, $460 for one bearing. So how this works is the power goes up the right side to the Nexus Hub. It transfers through, and the power comes down the left side to the rear wheel. So can you see what's happening here? We've got a chain tensioner here. And if I freewheel backwards, it's got the freewheel inside the Nexus Hub. So the rear sprocket on the back wheel is fixed. There is no freewheel on the back wheel. So if I turn the wheel, can you see that? Can you see what's going on there? So that's how the system works. And why this would work well on a downhill bike is there's no derailleur, which might catch on a rock. A derailleur always allows the chain to have some play, and in the wrong situation, off falls the chain. This here, can you see there's almost no play at all? There's a little bit of play, but it doesn't matter where you go. It's always the same amount of play, because this is a constant between this sprocket and this sprocket here. So that's how the system works. And you've also seen the video how the linkage works. That's how I got introduced to Mitch, actually, because I wanted a video and I asked him if he would shoot that video. That's the first video that he shot in this shop. These forks are RST. They're, I don't know how much travel they got. They're upside down forks. And that's what the bike was made with. Richard wanted Hope disc brakes, front and rear. So this is basically original Hope back from the late 90s. Hope has changed now. This is single piston. Now they're dual piston, and the rotors are lighter and all that. So he had a Hope hub on the front. The Hope hub was gone, so I made this hub. I styled it off the rear hub, which my friend Dan made for me, because I guess I was out of time, and he was working at a machine shop. So thank you, Dan, for the rear hub. This is carbon fiber, 60/60 aluminum flanges. That was a little bit of a trick to get the brake boss here and the flanges happening at the same time, but that all worked out. Yeah, there was a lot of work to do. You can see here all the dents here. That's from crashing and things like that. When I talked to Chris, he told me that one day he was on his way up to a race. I think it was Maple Ridge, and the 69er was on the back of his car, and he was doing 40 miles an hour, and the bike fell off, and there was the bike sliding down the road, and no cars hit it. So he picked up the bike, he put it on the back of the bike rack, went to the race, raced the bike, came home. So this bike has been through a lot. It's been raced for at least 5 seasons, and somehow it survived all that and getting welded up and taken out again. So I'm very happy to have it in my shop. It's nice that it's all restored. People say, well, why don't you ride it? Well, I did a bunch of welding on it to fix it up because some of the welds weren't looking so good, so I ground them out. It's not heat treated, and if I take this off-road, it's going to get all dirty. So no, it's good just like it is. We hope you've enjoyed this segment of the 69er. Mitch and I like coffees. That'd be great if you buy us some coffees. If you like this and subscribe, that's great for us too. Thank you very much. See you next time. Stay safe.